My son called me a pig the afternoon the county recorder called to ask if I meant to give away my house. When my phone buzzed with a voicemail from Mark. Stop being a pig and sign the papers. You don't deserve that place. 5 minutes later, a woman from the Dorchester County Register of Deeds asked whether I'd just filed a quitclaim deed, transferring my home to a limited liability company I'd never heard of. My hands went cold. The pruning shears clamped on the brick. The day my own son called me a pig was the day I understood. They weren't waiting for me to get old. They were trying to push me off my porch while I was still standing on it. Quick pause. Subscribe, hit like, and drop your city in the comments so I can say hi next time. I played Mark's voicemail again at my kitchen table, next to the cast iron skillet Hank seasoned so carefully. Pig. My son's voice. Flat, contemptuous, with Kendra's whisper in the background. Just say it, Mark. There was no mom, no concern, only orders. On the board by the fridge, I still had Sunday's choir practice time written in red. I was wearing my church t-shirt because I'd been dusting. I felt suddenly like a trespasser in my own kitchen. I called the county back. The clerk put me on hold, then came back with a kind voice. Ma'am, a deed was submitted electronically this morning at 10:12 a.m., notarized in Charleston. It says you conveyed the property at 114th Houghton Lane to a company called Palmetto Guardian Homes, LLC. She spelled it out. Is that your signature? She could email me a PDF. I said, yes, please. While my email spun, I opened the receipt tin. I keep everything. Grocery totals scribbled in pencil, Hank's old DMV renewals, the card from the florist who did his funeral roses. I pulled out last month's dentist receipt, Wednesday, 10:30 a.m. And then the county email arrived. The quitclaim deed had a wobbly version of my signature and a notary seal from Charleston I'd never seen. Witnesses, 2 names I didn't recognize, but the timestamp was 10:12 a.m., the exact minute I'd been in line at Publix with paper towels and apples. I checked my bank app. 10:11 a.m., debit card, Publix, $14.27. If I had signed a deed at 10:12, I'd have had to clone myself. I forwarded the email to myself twice in case it vanished like a bad dream. Then I did what I always do when I'm rattled, set water to boil. The kettle whistled as a UPS truck rolled past the window. I breathed in the steam and wrote on a yellow legal pad, call bank fraud department, call title company, call Mark. I stared at my child's name and felt the oddest little click in my heart, like a button coming off a shirt. Mark is my oldest. He used to build Lego cities at my feet while I sewed quilts. He married Kendra 10 years ago. She sells houses and speaks with a glossed certainty that tugged at me from the start. My daughter, Lacey, lives in Phoenix and posts girl boss quotes on Instagram. My younger son, Ben, is in Atlanta, and Zoe's between startups. They're good at the modern way of saying words that sound like love and letting the actions do something else entirely. Last Thanksgiving, I hosted, like always, turkey, my macaroni pie, the green beans with bacon that Hank liked. After dessert, Kendra set her wine glass down and pointed at a grease splatter on my stove. It's frankly a hazard, Elaine. At your age. At your age. The phrase slid over me like an oil slick. Mark picked at the pie crust with a fork and said, the house would show better if it were lighter. Fresh floors, open plan. We could get you into something with an elevator and amenities. I joked, this is Somerville, not Boca. He didn't laugh. I never called them greedy. I called them busy. I told myself they were stressed, not cruel. But after Hank died, they started helping a lot. Mark set up automatic payments for your convenience, which meant he had access to my bill pay. Lacey sent me a link to a friendly reverse mortgage lender. Ben texted that he could park my savings in short-term high-yield instruments with friends in crypto. I said no to all of it, smiling. I baked them banana bread in disposable tins and wrapped it in twine. When the notary's journal page finally appeared in my inbox, the county clerk sent it, and I could see her careful cropping, I felt a white, clean anger. The entry said, Signer, Elaine Maynard. Instrument, quitclaim deed. Date and time, 10:05 a.m. The line for ID presented was filled in with state ID, number matching mine, and the thumbprint box had a smudge that looked like someone pressed, then lifted quickly, like the way you touch a stove to prove it's hot. The notary's address was a UPS store in West Ashley. I have never met that woman. At 10:05 a.m., I was joking with the produce guy who calls me Miss Elaine.
I took pictures of everything. The deed, the notary journal, my Publix receipt, and printed 2 copies of each. They slid warm into my hands. Then I pulled my church tote from its hook and packed a binder the way I used to pack field trip lunches. Exact, double-checked, a quiet prayer tucked in. I made divider tabs. Deed, ID, bank, texts, doorbell, receipts. Our doorbell camera keeps clips for 2 weeks. I scrolled. At 9:37 a.m. that morning, it showed Kendra standing on my porch. She was in a camel coat, knocking with 2 fingers like she didn't want to bruise the paint. I wasn't home to answer. She peered through the side window, then took a selfie, smiling, a house behind her, and walked away. She didn't call me. The bank fraud unit put me on hold for 20 minutes. Then a woman named Pam came on and, to her credit, didn't speak to me like I was confused. She asked if I'd opened a home equity line of credit 2 weeks ago. My scalp prickled. No, ma'am. She asked if I'd authorized an ACH to Palmetto Guardian Homes LLC for a management retainer. I said, I do not know that company, and I would not hire anyone to manage my home because it is not an investment. It is my home. She was quiet for a second. Then she asked me to read my driver's license number. We went line by line. At the end, she said, Miss Maynard, we'll freeze anything related to that HELOC and flag the account. You should also contact the title insurer listed on the deed and the county sheriff's office. I'm sending you a case number. Mark called while I was still on with the bank. I let it go to voicemail. When I listened, he sounded annoyed, like I was late to my own party. Mom, we are trying to help you monetize an asset before it becomes a burden. It's selfish to cling to a thing you can't even keep clean. The echo of pig hung behind every syllable. Then, sign the transfer. I have a buyer on the hook and a contractor who can start Tuesday. He did not mention that he'd already tried to sell my house without me. I texted him, come by at 7, alone. I'll leave the porch light on. I also texted Lacey and Ben, family meeting tonight at 7. Lacey sent a heart and virtual, like she wasn't going to come. Ben said, in Atlanta, LOL, like that was an address. At 5, I scooped chicken salad on crackers and set out ginger ale. I laid my binder on the coffee table and put the doorbell camera up on the TV, paused at 9:37 a.m. It felt like setting a place at the table for the truth. Mark was late, and he brought Kendra anyway. Her perfume hit the foyer a beat before she did. Hi, Elaine, she chirped, like she'd never used my front door without me home. Mark took up space on the couch like he owned it, scrolling his phone. He didn't look at the photos on the wall, Hank on Folly Beach at sunset, the kids in Christmas pajamas in 1997. I said, alone. Kendra said, we're a team, and the issue is time-sensitive. Kendra, I said, you visited my porch at 9:37 this morning, but the deed says I signed in Charleston at 10:05, and it was filed at 10:12. If I was in Somerville and you were here, how did I get to Charleston and back faster than a hummingbird? I clicked the remote. The doorbell video rolled. Kendra, in camel coat, tapping the glass with her nails. That proves nothing, she said too fast. I slid the printed deed across the coffee table. This signature? It's not mine. The notary's journal says I presented my ID. Funny, you must have my wallet then. I patted the pocket of my cardigan and pulled my driver's license out, laid it flat like a card in a game I did not plan to lose. Mark glanced down. He blinked. He didn't pick it up. Mom, stop. This is a lot of paperwork you're not familiar with. I'm familiar enough to call fraud by its first name. The porch light flickered. In the dining room, the turkey platter Hank bought me leaned against the hutch like a witness. Kendra's smile quivered around the edges. Your kitchen is unsanitary. It smells like gas. The HOA is concerned. We got a letter. Didn't we, Mark? It's unsafe for you to remain here.
The HOA doesn't have a key to my stove, I said, and we don't have gas. We have electric. I let the silence sit. Did you file a complaint? Kendra smoothed her hair. We advocated as responsible family. You called me a pig, I said to my son. He looked at the window. It was a metaphor. For what? Hogging my home? For wallowing, he said, and shrugged as if we were in a debate club. In grief, in clutter, in inertia. I felt my age then, not as a weakness, but as a ledger. I have outlived Hank. I have paid off this mortgage. I have birthdays etched into flour sack towels and recipes rewritten with more butter because why not? And I have a spine. Here is what will happen, I said. I've already called the bank. I will be calling the sheriff and the State Consumer Protection Office in the morning. I've scheduled a meeting with a title attorney, and I've started a binder with evidence. You, Mark, will not contact my bank, my HOA, or my doctor ever again. Kendra, you will delete any listing you wrote for my house. After that, I will make decisions about my estate. They will not include people who call me a pig. It hurt to say it, but it felt clean. Kendra laughed. A high, brittle sound like ice cubes cracking. You think you can cut your own children out because you're in a mood? She said. There are laws. There are also choices, I said, and records. For the first time, Mark's face broke, not with remorse, but with calculation. He leaned forward, elbows on knees. We've already put money into this, he said quietly. Deposits. I signed contracts. There are penalties. I did not co-sign, and you lacked authority to act for me. I paused, then said it so he could hear the click of it. I revoke any informal permission I ever gave you to pay a bill or call a utility or speak for me. From this minute, you are a stranger to my accounts. His jaw tensed. You're going to regret this. Maybe, but you'll regret the alternative sooner. They left without goodbyes. The ginger ale sweated on coasters shaped like palmetto trees. I didn't cry. I washed the glasses by hand and set them upside down in the rack to gleam. At 8:19 p.m., Lacey FaceTimed me from her couch in Phoenix. She had a collagen mask on and a show playing in the background. Mom, Mark says you're making it hard. We're trying to protect you. I said, protect me from owning my house? She said, from being taken advantage of, and blinked at herself on the screen. I asked, who's taking advantage? She looked away. Her ring light reflected in her eyes like little moons. At 9:02 p.m., Ben texted me, left you a voicemail. I know a guy who can make the deed thing go away, but we should retitle into a trust with me as trustee to prevent this from happening again. I stared at the words, me as trustee, until the letters felt like marching ants. I slept lightly, like the house was breathing shallow. At 7:30 the next morning, I drove to the sheriff's substation off Baconsbridge Road with my binder in my tote.
The deputy at the window listened without smirking. He took my report and wrote down the bank case number. We see a lot of caregiver scams, not as many with family. I nodded. He gave me a copy of my statement. It was crisp and official, and made my stomach dip. Back home, a white envelope was stuck under my mat. Notice of violation from my HOA. Unsightly debris and odors. Potential vermin. I laughed out loud. I keep my kitchen cleaner than a showroom. And I do not have vermin. I have a lemon tree and a compost tumbler and a bird feeder. On Friday, a contractor I'd never met arrived with a clipboard and 2 men in denim. "We're here to do the demo," he said, cheerful. He gestured at my living room. "Open this up, brighten it. The buyer wants sightlines." "The buyer?" I echoed. He read a name off his form. Palmetto Guardian Homes, LLC. I could have called the police, but I did something better. I held up the binder. "This address is subject to a fraud investigation. Anyone who damages this property will be part of it," I said simply, with the steady voice you get when you've graded papers and wrangled choir altos for decades. He wavered. He peered at the street as if deciding if he'd been punked. Then he made a call, low-voiced, to K. He stepped back from my porch like it might spring shut. "Sorry for the confusion, ma'am," he said, and left with both men and their clipboards.
When I called Adult Protective Services for guidance, the woman on the phone was calm. APS can be a hammer, but this time I needed a mirror. She said, "If you feel pressured, document everything. If anyone tries to isolate you, call us. We can do a wellness check." I thanked her. It was embarrassing and great to be 67 and have to say I might need a wellness check because my children were enthusiastic about asset optimization. That afternoon, I drove to the title attorney on Old Trolley Road. His office smelled like lemon cleaner and paper. He wore a blue tie with tiny anchors and listened without interrupting. He pulled the deed up on his screen and frowned. "Notary's seal is legit," he said, "but the journal entry is sloppy. If you weren't there, it's voidable. We'll file an affidavit of fraud and record it alongside the deed, so any search shows a cloud on title. We'll also send notice to the title insurer on the transaction that they may be insuring a mess. Have you changed your locks?" I laughed again, the kind that feels like hiccups. "It's not a burglary," I said. "It's a paper storm." "Storms blow doors," he said. "Change 'em." I did. I called a local locksmith who used to sing tenor 2 pews behind me. He came with a son who looked like he still had summer freckles. They swapped my deadbolt and handed me 3 keys in a tiny envelope. "On the house," he said, softly, when I tried to pay full price. "Hank taught me in Boy Scouts how to tie a bowline. He was a good man." The HOA called a special meeting about my compliance status. The president, Randy, who wears golf shirts like uniforms, wrapped a gavel he bought on Amazon and acted like I was on trial for liking birdseed. A woman I didn't know read a complaint tacket. Photos of my side yard mess, which was bags of pine straw for mulch stacked neatly by the fence. Another photo, zoomed awkwardly, showed a pot on my stove. "Grease," the caption said. The date and timestamps of the bottom were 6:14 a.m. and 6:16 a.m., 2 minutes apart, taken from my backyard like someone stood on my patio without asking. I scanned the room and saw Kendra in a chair against the wall, arms crossed, eyes bright like she'd brought popcorn. I raised my hand. "How many board members are permitted to enter homeowners' backyards to take photos unannounced?" I asked. Randy shuffled papers. "We received a concerned relative's materials," he said. "A relative with a key?" I asked. Kendra smiled without showing teeth. The woman with the packet cleared her throat. "Your home would benefit from a refresh. It could help your property value." "I am not for sale," I said. I didn't argue. I wrote down their words in my neat schoolteacher cursive, and when the meeting ended, I asked for the minutes to be sent to me. "We don't usually," she said. "Put me on the email," I said and smiled. Smiles are armor. I took Hank's old fishing hat out of the hall closet, not because I needed it, but because I needed him, and set it on the kitchen counter like a relic.
Then I opened a new notebook and wrote across the top, case, pig. It made me laugh so hard I had to sit down. If I couldn't stand to hear the word for my son, I could own it myself. PIT, I wrote beneath. Protect, investigate, guard. Each day got a list. Each list got a check mark. Stay till the end, I'll show the truth. I started with my thumbprint. I went to the UPS store where the notary stamp had come from. A teenager in a branded polo said the notary worked afternoons. I bought a book of stamps and a sheet of bubble mailers to avoid staring. At 2, a woman with tidy braids and calm eyes rolled a cart of files from the back. "I'm Joy," she said. "How can I help?" "I think someone used your seal on a deed I didn't sign," I said, setting my binder down. Joy looked at the printout like a nurse looks at a chart, full attention. She rolled her chair to the computer. "That's my stamp, but this is not my handwriting." She turned her notary journal toward me and ran her finger down the entries. On the date in question, I was at the DMV notarizing title transfers from 9:30 to noon. The UPS store keeps a log. "And you aren't here," she pointed to the blank space where my name was not. "That's not your thumbprint, either." She pocket-copied the page where she was not, signed her own statement, and stapled it. It was the first paper that felt like a hugged shoulder. "I'm sorry this is happening to you," she said. "It's been a season." She didn't say of what. On my way out, I ran into a neighbor, Linda, who used to nurse on the night shift and now grows zinnias as tall as me. She hugged me right over my evidence binder. "I heard something about contractors at your place," she said. "I still have Hank's spare key in our tin from when we cat sat. It's safe, don't worry." Then she whispered, "Kendra asked me for it this spring. Can you imagine? Said you'd given permission. I told her to go fish."
I thought about calling and screaming. Instead, I went to the county recorder's portal, searched my parcel again, and printed the page that showed the fake deed, my affidavit of fraud, and the time-stamped sequence like beads on a string. Then I did something important. I wrote a letter by hand to each of my 3 children. Not dramatic, not begging, just facts and consequences. I told them the rules by which I would proceed. Then I signed my name in the steady way my high school typing teacher taught me to hold my wrist. The next day, I drove to a new attorney, an estate lawyer recommended by my neighbor with the zinnias. Her office had hydrangeas on the wallpaper and a jar of hard candies for clients. She asked me questions like a friend. What did Hank want? What do you want? What keeps you up? I told her, I want to live in peace. I want my things to go to people who know how to think. I want to stop pretending my children are going to remember who I am if I write enough checks. I can draft a will, she said, or we can create a revocable living trust. We can include a no contest clause if that's appropriate, and we can name someone you trust as your agent for health and finances, who is not your children. I have a choir friend, I said, Ruth. She sits to my left and knows where the alto line is even when I forget. She's careful. Then Ruth, she said, and smiled. I asked, Am I a bad mother? She said, You are a clear one. On Friday morning, I signed papers that felt like pulling up a deep taproot. The sound of pages turning was like a broom on my porch steps. Clean, necessary, sane. The trust would hold my house. It would not include my children. It would fund scholarships at the technical college for girls who wanted to be mechanics, because Hank would have loved that. It would give money to the women's shelter near the interstate, and to our church's music program, and to a food pantry that rings my phone every December with gratitude. My children would receive what I wrote in their letters, the truth. My phone vibrated while I was still holding the pen. It was Mark. I let it go to voicemail, then listened from the parking lot, the hydrangea wallpaper at my back. You can't do this, he said, voice quiet and hard. You are a pig. Pigs don't get to decide. They get led. I saved the voicemail to the audio tab and titled it Oink. If you think I didn't laugh, you don't know me. The title attorney sent me a PDF that afternoon. The title insurer had responded to his notice, requesting statements from all parties to evaluate coverage. If the deed was fraudulent, they would have to figure out who had liability. He CC'd the bank fraud unit, which had delayed funding the HELOC pending review. The email was full of words that meant I had bought time, cloud, adverse, rescission, and I breathed easier. Time is land in a flood. That night, I had a church potluck. I brought deviled eggs dusted with paprika like my mother taught me. Ruth squeezed my hand during the hymn and whispered, "You okay?" I nodded. The bass section was flat, and I corrected them with a glare like a schoolmarm. It felt like being me again. After, in the parking lot under the sweet gum trees, Linda told me she'd seen Kendra loading bags into her SUV at noon. New granite samples, she said, eyes sharp. I heard her tell the guy at the tile store, "Mom's house is going to pay for the pool." I felt the kind of calm people confuse for weakness. I went home, fed the cat on the porch that isn't mine, and set my alarm for 6 a.m. I had work to do. I spent Saturday creating a timeline. On the left, dates and times. On the right, what I had: receipts, videos, emails, letters, voicemails. I printed my bank statement with the Publix transaction highlighted the day of the false notarization. I taped a photo of the porch visitor at 9:37. I stapled the HOA complaint about odors with the timestamps at 6:14 a.m. when Kendra would have been getting her hair done across town if her Instagram stories were right. And they were. She had posted a boomerang of a salon sink, captioned, "Rise and grind, blondes." I did not need to be a detective. I needed to be a good librarian. By Monday, Palmetto Guardian Homes had filed nothing further. The bank sent a letter, pending investigation. The HOA, perhaps rattled by my document requests, sent me 3 months of minutes in a flurry. In one, Kendra had moved to expedite enforcement at 114 Cotton Line, secoined by Randy. I circled the line and tucked it under minutes. Somewhere in those pages was the lever I needed. At noon, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. "This is Trent, Palmetto Guardian. We seem to have a misunderstanding." "We don't," I said. "You signed a deed," he said, mild. "I did not. But keep talking. These calls are recorded." They weren't. I only wanted him nervous. He chuckled. "You're feisty for your age." "I'm careful," I said, and hung up.
That afternoon, the HOA posted late fee on my online portal for a fine I had never seen before. I printed the screen and added it to the binder. Then I walked across the street to Linda's yard and asked if I could record her statement about the key request. She said yes, and she spoke slowly into my phone with her hand on my arm. Then I called Ruth and asked if she would be my agent, as the estate lawyer had drafted. She cried, I cried. We laughed. Then we signed the papers on my coffee table, 2 old women with good pens. At sunset, as the sky turned the color of old apricots, a white sedan pulled up. A young couple got out, clasping a printed sheet. "We have a showing," the woman said. "Is this 114 Cotton Lane?" "It is," I said. "There is no showing." "Redfin says," the man began. "Kendra says many things," I said. "You two look like my 3rd cousins. Go have dinner at Oscar's and leave me be." They apologized. They left. I added unauthorized showings to the list. By the time the week turned again, I felt less like prey and more like a woman who had gotten her feet under her after black ice.
There is a special strength in women of my age. We have been told our bodies are only useful as rooms for other people's lives. We have been asked to sign and to smile at desks across America. It is a rare pleasure to say no. The sheriff's office called to tell me a detective had been assigned. "We'll need to speak with your son," he said. I gave them Mark's number. It sat in my chest like a stone. I had birthed the boy. Now I was handing him to a process that would not treat him as my baby. It was not revenge. It was consequence. I made cornbread the way my grandmother did, in the sizzling skillet, butter bubbling up the sides like a promise. I ate a square with honey and watched the porch cat wash its paws on the step. Then I opened my laptop and began to write the next letter. This one to women I might never meet, who would want to know how I did this, how I disinherited all my children and slept afterward. Before I could finish the second sentence, my phone buzzed with a blocked caller. I let it go to voicemail. When I listened, I heard Kendra's voice, high with shock. "Elaine, you tattled. The bank froze the line. You have no idea what you've done." I didn't respond. I added, "Bank freeze confirmed" to the binder and checked it off, because order is its own lullaby. 2 days later, a big envelope arrived by certified mail, a demand to vacate from Palmetto Guardian Homes, citing the recorded deed and accusing me of trespass in my own home. It gave me 5 days. I got a pen, and in the margin, in neat cursive, I wrote, "No." Then I carried it to the title attorney's office, where the receptionist made a copy and said, "I'll get him." He came into the lobby with the jaw I recognized from courtroom TV and said, "They're showing their hand. Good." When I stepped into my yard that evening, I saw the porch cat had brought me a gift, as cats do. A small ribbon cut cleanly from something. Wrapping paper? A curtain? I picked it up and rolled it between my fingers. It was the exact shade of Kendra's nail polish. I laughed until the hydrangea swayed. The morning of the HOA hearing, where I had to show cause, I dressed in my best skirt, the navy one I wore to Hank's service, and I pinned on the brooch my mother left me. The board sat in folding chairs like judges at a fair. Kendra wasn't on the panel. She sat in the back, arms crossed, mouth tight. Randy read the violations and asked if I had anything to say. "Yes," I said. "I have photos taken from inside my fence line without notice. I have minutes showing a board member moving to expedite action against me while also acting as a listing agent on my property. That is a conflict, and it voids any enforcement on my address. If you continue, I will ask the state to inquire into your board's practices." I handed over a packet with page numbers and tabs, the teacher in me deeply satisfied. They excused me to the hallway while they deliberated. I leaned against a soda machine and closed my eyes. When they called me back, Randy looked like he'd bitten a lemon. "We're rescinding the fine," he said, "and we'll be appointing an ethics committee to review procedures." Kendra stood so fast her chair scraped. She left without looking at me. I smiled at the secretary, who looked grateful the storm had passed. On my way home, I stopped at the post office and bought another book of stamps and 2 more green return receipt cards. I felt like myself again, which is to say, a woman who knows where her papers are and what time the library closes. That night, there was a hard knock at my door. "Keep watching. There will be justice." When I opened it, a deputy stood on my porch with his hat in his hands and a packet under his arm. "Ms. Maynard," he asked, "got something for you." He handed me a restraining order request against me, filed by Mark, claiming I was harassing him, threatening his family, unwell. The hearing was set for the following week. The world tilted like a carnival ride. I thanked the deputy, closed the door, and then I did the single most important thing I have done in this entire story. I sat down and drank a glass of water. I called Ruth. She answered on the second ring, her voice calm, like an anchor. "Come over," she said. "Bring the binder." We sat at her kitchen table with her cat huffing at us from the counter. We made a list of everything I had: the fraudulent deed, the notary's journal showing I wasn't there, the doorbell video, the bank freeze letter, the HOA minutes, the listing screenshots, the text messages, the voicemail where my son named me Pig. "You'll be fine," Ruth said. "You have the truth in your papers and your eyes." On the morning of the hearing, I wore my navy skirt again, and my choir pen. The judge was a woman my age who looked like she'd read a lot of nonsense and had no more patience for it. Mark sat at one table with a lawyer whose tie had happily knotted itself too tight. I sat alone, binder open, tabs peeking like flags. "Ms. Maynard, do you have representation?" the judge asked. "No, Your Honor," I said, "but I have documentation." She smiled, very slightly. Mark spoke first. His lawyer said I was paranoid, delusional, and non-compliant with family care. He said I had self-neglected my property. Kendra dabbed tissue at dry eyes in the second row. The lawyer waved the Palmetto Guardian deed like a hymn book and said I'd refuse to yield possession after lawful transfer. When it was my turn, I stood and spoke like I was reading to my students. I handed the clerk copies of each exhibit. I walked through the timeline. I showed the doorbell video frame 937 versus 1005 Charleston. I pointed to my Publix receipt 1011. I shared Joy's notarized statement. I passed up the bank letter freezing the HELOC. Then I played the voicemail where my son called me a pig. The courtroom air changed. It was so quiet I could hear the air conditioning click. The judge looked directly at Mark. "Sir," she said, "did you call your mother that?" He swallowed. "It was out of context," he said. "What context would make that appropriate?" He didn't answer. The judge looked back at me. "Ms. Maynard, you're clear and organized. Your documentation persuades me that you're competent and that someone attempted to transfer your property without consent. I'm denying the restraining order. I'm entering a temporary order that your son and his associates are not to contact you pending the fraud investigation. And I'm referring this matter to Adult Protective Services and the sheriff for further review." She tapped her pen, and "Ma'am, nice tabs." Outside the courtroom, Kendra hissed, "You think this is over?" Her mascara had given up. "No," I said. "I think this is recorded." A week later, the title insurer sent a formal position letter that crawled with gentle legal words, but the meat of it was this. They would disclaim coverage for Palmetto Guardian homes because of material misrepresentation, and they would support corrective measures to return title to status quo. In plainer language, the deed would be unwound. The county recorder indexed the letter. My parcel page looked like a victory scrapbook. I was drinking coffee when my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't know, a screenshot of a group chat labeled PGH Acquisitions. The names at the top: Trent, Kendra, and my stomach sank. Ben, my youngest. The messages were dates and numbers, then one from Kendra: "We need her out. Pig is stuck." Another from Ben: "Randy can push fines faster. Lacey can pressure with wellness decline." My hands shook hard. I had to set the phone down, then pick it back up with both hands like a Bible. There it was in writing. Not just Mark and Kendra, but Ben too. Lacey had sat in Phoenix with her collagen mask and planned to pronounce me unwell. I sat at my table in my lemon-scented kitchen and realized my children had become a committee. I was not their mother. I was their project. I saved the screenshot and printed it. Then I called the detective and sent him a photo of the chat. He said, "We'll be in touch." 5 minutes later, an email from APS pinged. They had reviewed the court's referral and would be closing my case with supportive services offered, meaning they saw no neglect, only a woman taking care of herself. I printed that too. That afternoon, I drove to the estate lawyer's office to sign one last thing. It was simple, but weighty. An amendment to my trust with a paragraph that made clear, in plain words, that my children, Mark, Lacey, and Ben would receive nothing from my estate. Not a dish, not a dime. I initialed the line where she pointed, my hand steady. The pen made a little scratch, and the sound it made was not vengeance, it was self-respect. When I got home, there was a single rose on my porch in a water bottle cup. Kendra's car idled at the end of the street. She watched like a cat. I left the rose where it was.
That night, I lay in bed and listened to the house. The ice maker popped. The AC breathed. The hydrangeas brushed the siding in the breeze. I thought about the first time Mark said "Mom," the way he patted my cheek with his starfish hand, and I thought about him calling me a pig. I held both truths. I let them sit like stones in a bowl. I slept. 2 mornings later, at 6:32 a.m., someone cut my internet line. I know because I was streaming the weather and it froze. I went outside and found the cable snipped, neat as embroidery floss. I laughed because it was so petty. I called the provider. They restored it by noon and replaced the line with one in a hard plastic sheath, the color of a pencil. The technician whistled while he worked and told me his mother keeps a binder like mine. She calls it her just in case. We high-fived and I made him a turkey sandwich. At 3:14 p.m., I got an email from the title attorney with the subject line, R.E. County. I clicked. The county had accepted a corrective affidavit and indexed it. The fake deed would be flagged forever, a stain that wouldn't wash from anybody's hands. The attorney wrote, "We're almost there." I set my laptop down, walked to the front door, and stood on the threshold like a bride, toasting myself with air. The next knock on my door was softer than the last. When I opened it, I saw Lacey. She wore sunglasses so big they looked like they should come with an apology. She lifted them and her eyes were wet. "Mom," she said. She looked smaller than her posts. "Come in," I said, because I was raised right. I poured her sweet tea and we sat across from each other at my kitchen table, where all the important things in my life have happened. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said. "I meant to get something you wanted," I said, calmly. She cried in a quiet, neat way that made me think of the time she didn't get chosen for show choir, and I took her for a milkshake. She said, "We thought we were protecting you." "From what?" I asked. "Dust?" "From being alone," she said, and looked at the hydrangea bush outside like it might testify. "I am not alone," I said. "I have a church that sings with me, a neighbor who waters my flowers, a banker who trembles when she writes her cell number because she is kind and scared, and a binder that tells the truth. I would love to have my children, but I will not have their schemes. Those are 2 different things." She nodded like a student who hears the answer and doesn't like it, but knows it's correct. "Ben," she began. "I saw the messages," I said. She flinched. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm sorry too," I said. "Sorry I didn't teach you earlier that love is not leverage." She left with her sunglasses back on and her shoulders a little higher than when she came. I didn't hug her. I am allowed to protect myself, even from my own heart. That night, my phone lit with a new text, a screenshot of a calendar invite, final walkthrough, PGH, with my address in the location line. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. I smiled like a fox. I set my alarm for 7, put on my church t-shirt, set the binder on the coffee table, and made muffins. At 9:58 a.m., my doorbell chimed. When I opened the door, a camera crew from a small local house flipping show stood on my porch with a woman in heels, a man with teeth wider than paper, and Trent in a ball cap grinning like a boy who had never been told no. "We're here to see the property," he said and waved at the cameraman. "This is going to be great TV." I stepped out, shut the door behind me, and held up the packet I'd kept ready in a plastic sleeve. The county's corrective affidavit, the bank's freeze letter, the title insurer's position, the detective's card. I said, "You're not coming in, but you will want to see the part where the notary says I never signed." Trent's smile slid.
The woman in heels looked at the cameraman, then at me. "We need drama," she said under her breath. "Try yoga," I said, and closed the door gently so the camera caught my hydrangeas and not my face. 2 hours later, my phone rang. It was the detective. He said, "We've executed a search warrant on Palmetto Guardian's office. We recovered several IDs, notary stamps, and files, including a folder labeled with your address. We'll be contacting your son for an interview." I closed my eyes and saw the ribbon on my porch again, that sliver of pink polish. Evidence comes in all shapes and sizes. By late afternoon, the group chat that had been anonymously forwarded to me pinged again, this time a new screenshot from an unknown sender. A message from Trent: "Shut it down. Title won't insure. Bank froze. Who tipped?" Then from Ben: "She built a case." Then from Kendra: a pig emoji. I saved it with the others, printed, date-stamped, tabbed. There is a rhythm to holding the line. Gather, label, breathe. That evening, Ruth and I sat on my porch with iced tea and watched the sky go lavender. She asked very gently, "Are you sure?" She meant the trust, the disinheritance, the future with no children at Christmas. I watched the little solar lights I'd tucked into the hydrangeas flicker on, one by one. "I'm sure," I said. "I can feed anyone who shows up at my table, but the table is mine."
The next morning, I drove to the technical college to deliver the first small check from me, now, while I'm living, toward the scholarship Hank would have loved. The financial aid counselor cried. I cried. We took a photo with my flip phone, and it came up blurry and perfect. When I got home, I put the receipt into a new tab labeled "Good." At noon, the title attorney's assistant called to say the county had scheduled a hearing to unwind the fraudulent deed formally. "Show up with your documents," she said. "Wear whatever you wore to win last time." I laughed and checked my navy skirt for cat hair. The day before the hearing, I got a text from Ben. 4 words. "Can I come over?" I stared at the screen long enough for the cat to make a circle and sit. Then I texted back, "Tomorrow, 5 p.m. Bring nothing." He arrived on time, for once, in a t-shirt I'd bought him in 10th grade, the vintage kind people buy for $80 now, which is foolishness. He sat on the edge of the couch like a boy who'd been called to the principal. "I messed up," he said, and he looked like he might understand it. "You did," I said. He talked for 20 minutes without stopping, about rent, about a startup that folded, about a girlfriend who wanted a ring, about debt. "Trent promised a finder's fee," he said, and I let the words lay flat between us like a fish. I didn't think it would go this far. "You didn't think about me," I said. He flinched. "I did," he said, too fast. "I thought about how to manage you." "That's not thinking of me," I said. "That's thinking of you with me as a tool." He nodded and put his face in his hands. For a moment, I saw the child who'd fallen off his bike on the cul-de-sac and blinked up at me with blood on his lip. I put my calm on the table to keep my balance against my own softness. I filed the amendment. "You and your brother and sister are not in my estate. You will not get my house. You will not get my cookware. You will not get my quilts. When I die, you will get a letter that says I loved you." And I did. And I also loved myself enough to not be stolen. He exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for a year. "I deserve that," he said. "You deserve better than what you've been choosing," I said, "but not from me, from yourself." He cried, the messy kind, and asked if he could hug me. I said yes. The hug felt like both a hello and a goodbye. When he left, the house felt bigger, which is a strange way of saying I could hear my own voice in it again. The hearing at the county was held in a room with a drop ceiling and a long table. The clerk had that fierce kindness of people who keep the rules because the rules keep us. Trent did not show.
A lawyer, neither he nor Kendra could afford long-term, shuffled papers and didn't meet my eyes. The county attorney presented my timeline with all the plodding grace of a metronome. Joy, the notary, testified that the journal entry was not hers. The detective testified about the search warrant finds, smoothing the page corners with big thumbs. When asked to speak, I stood and said, "This house is where I learned to sleep without Hank, and where I know how many steps it takes to get from my bed to the coffee maker in the dark. It is not an asset, it is a home, and I did not sign it away." The board moved to unwind the deed unanimously. They recorded it before lunch. I drove home, parked in my driveway, and sat for a while with my hands on the steering wheel. The sun warmed through the windshield like approval. The detective called that afternoon. "We've arrested Trent on forgery and identity theft. We're pursuing charges related to other properties, too. As for your son, we've referred the case to the solicitor. He's cooperating." I thanked him and hung up. Then I did what women do after winning a war. I made dinner. Meatloaf, mashed potatoes with the masher that has belonged to 3 generations, green beans cooked too long because that's how I like them. The next week, my HOA sent a newsletter with a section titled Process Improvements. It mentioned conflict of interest training for board members and a new rule limiting use of relative provided materials in enforcement. Kendra's name was not on the board roster anymore. I clipped the page and put it under Good with the scholarship receipt. 2 days later, a small claims notice arrived. The contractor who had tried to demo my house without authorization wanted a deposit back from Mark. Not my problem, not my money, not my name. I pinned it to my corkboard as a reminder that gravity works even in paperwork. A month after the deed was unwound, I hosted a backyard supper for the people who had held me up without asking for anything back. We ate on folding tables under the hydrangeas. Ruth brought a peach cobbler that tasted like summer remembered. Linda brought a bowl of zinnias the size of a parade. The choir altos sang Blessed Assurance softly while the grill hissed. The porch cat stole a hot dog, and no one scolded him. We took a photo, and I put it on my fridge with a magnet shaped like South Carolina. Under it, I wrote in Sharpie, "This is family."
The pig case binder became a bookend on my shelf, fat and patient. Sometimes I pull it down like a yearbook and thumb through the tabs, not to reopen a wound, but to remind myself of the stitch I learned. Protect, investigate, guard. 3 months later, I met with the estate lawyer one last time to finalize some housekeeping. "Do you want to leave letters with the documents?" she asked. "Sometimes it helps." I had already written them, one for each child. Each letter was simple and firm. Mark's began, "You called me a pig. I was your mother." It went on to say, "I hope you choose tenderness for people who feed you when you are old." I thanked him for the Lego cities. I told him the hour he was born was the brightest of my life and that nothing he could do would unmake that, but that love and access are not the same thing. Lacey's read, "You mistook management for love. I told her to use her influence for women who don't look like her and have less. I told her she could bring a casserole to anyone's door anywhere she lived, and that would start a new life for her, if she let it." Ben's read, "You are not bad. You are not a child. Be a good man. It is not too late." I told him to find work that doesn't require hiding his phone. I left sealed copies with the lawyer and kept copies in my desk, weighted with a smooth stone Hank had picked up at Folly Beach and said felt like a wish. If you're wondering about Mark's pig, here's the truth I promised you. He didn't just mean dirty or greedy. In the flipper world Trent moved in, pig was shorthand in texts and whispers for profit in grandma, a sick little joke for houses they could take with some paperwork and a hurry up. I learned that from the detective after the search warrant. They had a folder on me labeled Pig 114. When he told me,
I closed my eyes and breathed in the smell of my hydrangeas through the open window and counted to 5. Then I said, "Well, I'm a sow with tusks." When the solicitor's office called to say they were offering Mark a pretrial diversion if he cooperated fully against Trent and completed a financial ethics course and community service at the food pantry I donate to, I said I had no objection. Accountability over annihilation. It felt like the choice Hank would have made, and I wanted to be the woman he had loved. Months passed, seasons turned. I planted collards and pansies. I painted the porch swing the soft blue of old china. I learned to change the AC filter by myself, standing on a kitchen chair with my phone flashlight in my mouth, cussing only in the way a church lady can. Mercy! I joined a quilting guild and taught a teenager how to thread a needle. I kept my receipts, not because I expected trouble, but because paper and I are friends now. At Christmas, I mailed cards to everyone. The detective, Joy the notary, the bank manager, the title attorney, the locksmith, the UPS clerk, and the choir. Inside each card, I wrote, "Thank you for being a fence when the gate was loose." I baked 6 dozen cookies and filled tins the way my mother did, with wax paper and a slip of paper that said, "Best on day 2." At New Year's Eve, I sat at my table with a glass of sweet tea and wrote a list of what I had done right that year. At the top, I wrote, "I refuse to be stolen." Under that, I gave young women wrenches and told them to go fix their lives. Under that, I learned that no is a complete sentence that sounds better with thank you after it. In February, Lacey came to see me again. She'd cut her hair, she had on flats instead of heels and a cardigan instead of a blazer. She looked like my girl again. We drank coffee and peeled clementines. She said, "I got a job at the shelter, writing their newsletters. It pays terribly. I love it." I hugged her at the door when she left and let my heart be both cautious and light. In March, Ben texted me a photo of a paycheck. He wrote, "I'm driving a delivery truck. It's honest." I sent him a thumbs up and a recipe for crock-pot ribs. In May, Mark mailed me a letter in his schoolboy hand. It said, "I'm sorry. I don't expect anything. I will not ask you for money again. I am attending meetings for people who like to feel in control. The counselor says to name what you did and what you will do. I tried to take your house. I will not try again." I put the letter under the good tab and felt something unknot inside my chest. Not forgiveness, but room. The house-flipping show that had tried to film my humiliation aired an episode about paperwork pitfalls, with the names bleeped and the houses blurred. A neighbor told me I was famous. I laughed. "I've always been famous in my kitchen," I said, and slid another tray of biscuits in the oven. I did not put my children back into my trust. I did not unlock the door that I had closed. I did not say that boundaries are temporary if you cry enough. I am not a pig. I am a woman who learned to live with her own company. I have hydrangeas that bloom like clouds. I have a quilt that feels like summer on my knees. I have a church that sings like the truth. I have a scholarship with my husband's name on it. I have keys that jingle when I walk and no one else's hands on them.
When I tell this story to women my age, they lean in. They laugh at the parts I laughed at. They gasp where I gasped. They understand that the worst part was not the deed. It was the moment my own son called me a pig. We talk about how to not let that word root in your heart. We talk about binders. We talk about choosing ourselves without apology. Here is what I want you to know. If you are 67 and scared, you can be the fence when the gate is loose. You can be the hand that lifts your own chin. You can disinherit your children and still love them the way you love the ocean. Beautiful, dangerous, best admired from a safe distance with a lifeguard on duty. I keep the voicemail on my phone. I don't play it. I label it evidence of what I survived, and I leave it there not to pick at a scab, but to honor the woman who made a list and got to work. And on good days, most days now, I make biscuits and take them to the neighbor with the zinnias, and we sit on her steps and talk about ordinary things until the sun goes soft. On the anniversary of the day the county called and the word pig tried to move in, I stood on my porch with a cup of coffee and blessed my house under my breath. You are mine, I said, to the peeling paint and the stubborn windows and the mailbox that leans. We made it. Then I walked inside, set down my cup, and opened my binder one more time because I wanted to put the last thing under good, an email from the technical college with a photo of a girl in grease-stained coveralls working on a carburetor, her face lit up like a hymn. The subject line read, First Maynard Scholar. I printed it, punched holes, slid it in, and smiled so wide my cheeks hurt. That night, I slept with the window open, the hydrangeas breathing in and out like old friends. And in the morning, I cooked pancakes for myself, one to eat now and one to eat cold at noon. And I set the extra at the far place at the table where I used to put a plate for Hank. We did fine, honey. We did better than fine. As for the title you clicked on, why did my son call me a pig, and how did I disinherit all my children? He called me a pig because he thought I was a barnyard animal stuck in a pen, a prophet in waiting. I disinherited all my children because I am not livestock. I am the farmer, and the fence, and the woman who writes the checks to the girls who will fix the tractors. I hope you never need a binder like mine. But if you do, know this. The tabs come in pretty colors, and the pen moves smooth across the page when your hand is steady. And the truth stacks up, one page after another, until it's too heavy for anyone to carry away. Personal experience shared for awareness and entertainment.
So, another story of my grandmother has end, and be clicking here, you will have when more such stories.